Hello, true crime and wine time friends. Thank you for joining me, your host, Terry Dussault, for this heartbreaking and insane case from my teenage years. For today's episode, I have decided to try a new version, yet a true flashback to my youth. Bartles and James wine cooler. Yes, they still make them. However, I don't remember them being quite so bougie. I say bougie because the flavor I have chosen is watermelon and mint, and it comes in a can. I only remember flavors like peach, raspberry, and black cherry. Or maybe I was just so young, I only like the ones that taste like Kool-Aid or Jolly Ranchers. Okay, I guess, admit that I drank in my teenage years? Okay, but I did. Let's move on. Let me open my wine cooler and pour it into a wine glass. Yes, I'm going to try to keep it classy and drink out of a glass and not the can. Ooh, smells very minty. Not bad. It kind of tastes like a wine spritzer. Okay, are you ready? Because this case is not only horrific, bloody, gory, insane, it's everything all wrapped up in one. This story is one of the most horrific crimes to take place in Houston, Texas. Let's get started. Malibu Grand Prix was the place where you could play video games for a quarter and hang out with your friends. But the true fun, for those with a driver's license, was driving the Malibu Varughese cars and pretending you were a real race car driver. Every boy and some girls I knew wanted to drive a fast car and race their friends. Malibu Grand Prix gave them that opportunity. I doubt they cared or even knew that the pit attendant had a remote that could cut off immediately and stop all engines in case of a spin out or if things got out of control. Because, we are letting teenagers drive these fast cars, probably along with some adults. Sadly, a place that was built to bring people joy became a place where one of the most gruesome murders in Houston's history took place. Okay, I'm going to take a quick sip. Watermelon and mint wine coolers, not bad. So we're going to dive into the case of 3 teenage males whose young lives ended on July 1st, 1983, when they brutally murdered 4 people. I'm going to start by telling you about Richard James Wilkerson, who was 19 on the date of the murders. Richard Wilkerson was born on April 18, 1964, and was known as RJ by his family and friends. Wilkerson only had a 10th grade education. There has not been a lot written or shared about his childhood. We do know, according to a news report, that Richard Wilkerson was engaged to Renee Maibu, age 18, who was 7 months pregnant with Wilkerson's child at the time of the robbery. Renee and Richard had planned to marry at the Harris County Courthouse on January 19, 1984, but Wilkerson was transferred to Texas Death Row before the two could exchange vows. Renee, who had given birth to Wilkerson's son, recently said she did not believe her boyfriend was guilty. Guys, I'm just telling you, this is a rough case. You're going to hear me having to take some deep, deep breaths. This case has stuck with me ever since I was a teenager. And while digging into this case, I have felt so many emotions and have cried, gotten angry, and I've yelled at my computer a couple of times. So bear with me as we dive into this case. Sorry, I snuck a sip there. So Richard Wilkerson was employed at the Grand Prix Amusement Center up until he was terminated on June 20th, 1983. Wilkerson was told he could pick up his final paycheck on or after June 30th. All he needed to do was come in, sign his final time card. On June 30th, around 7 p.m., Wilkerson went with his cousin, James Randall, to Kenneth Ray Ransom's home, where they went outside to talk in private so that Ransom's girlfriend and small child would not hear them. I gotta give them credit. They went outside and didn't discuss their devious and murderous plan in front of the child. The group then went back into the house where Ransom removed a butcher knife from the dish strainer. Ransom's girlfriend, Wanda Phillips, asked Kenneth where they were going with her knife because she needed it. I'm guessing she needed it to make dinner. It was a summer evening, and dinners typically run late. However, Ransom told his girlfriend that they were going to pick up Wilkerson's paycheck and that she would get her knife back. Hold on here. I would have thrown a fit and said, no, you're not taking my knife anywhere, especially not to pick up a paycheck. Why do you need a knife to go with your friend to pick up a paycheck? Okay, then again, maybe she was scared. Or maybe she wasn't up for a fight. I guess we will never know why she didn't. Between 9:30 and 10 o'clock that night, James Randall's mother said she saw her son, James Randall, her nephew, Richard Wilkerson, and another boy at her house. Randall's younger brother, Jesse, says he saw the boys leave sometime around midnight, and they didn't come back. Now, Wilkerson's sister said that her brother and cousin came by her house around 10 p.m. and that while she let her brother in, she saw Kenneth Ransom standing outside. She stated that her brother, Wilkerson, went into the kitchen and rummaged through the kitchen where they kept their knives. Then the three young men left together. We can only assume that they went back to Randall's house, as his younger brother said he saw them leave around midnight. Now, I have to stop here as this confused me a bit, and I find myself reading it over and over. The young men did as many young people did back in the day, still do today. They went in and out of each other's houses, like we all do. We didn't keep track, but yet Wilkerson looked for a knife in the kitchen. Not sure why the sister didn't think this was weird, that he dug through the drawer and then left. I don't know. But now, Ransom's girlfriend, Phillips, said that the three returned later around 3 a.m. on July 1st, 1983, and that Wilkerson was carrying a black satchel. It was stated that Ransom went into the bathroom at his girlfriend's home to tend to a severe cut on the inside of his right hand, and that all three men had blood on their clothing. Wilkerson then poured out the contents of the satchel, which had cash, a wallet, a calculator, a watch, and another piece of jewelry onto the bed. Some of the money was drenched in blood, which did not seem to bother the three as they counted out the money and gave Ransom his share. And Wanda Phillips said she thinks Ransom's share was around $325, which he put in his pocket and then went to watch TV. Phillips said Wilkerson and Randall talked about how they had slashed somebody's throat and put the knife in someone's temple. I've got to take a big drink because, hello, I just got to ask, why did this not freak her out? This is pretty refreshing. I am thinking I would have freaked out and found a way to call the police and report this. I mean, just think for a second. If your boyfriend and his friends slash someone's throat and then divvy up the money and act like it's no big deal, do you really think you're safe? Girl, you are not. I say run, don't walk. Then again, as I say, and you will hear me say, we never know what we will do until we are in that situation. However, I can say that I would get the heck out of Dodge. Maybe not at that moment, but I would have made an exit plan and gotten out of there. However, Ransom's girlfriend, Wanda Phillips, did not do this. She began cleaning up her kitchen. Now, remind you, it was 3 a.m. in the morning. Why all these people are still awake? I don't know. While cleaning her kitchen, she discovered a wallet, some credit cards, and a driver's license in the trash can that had the name Roddy Harris on it. Randall saw Phillips with the items and snatched them away and took them and threw them out in a dumpster. Wow. Now all I can think is her fingerprints are on the wallet and credit cards. You just heard them talking about slashing someone's throat. And your fingerprints are on the wallet, the driver's license. Okay, another reason to call the police. Get out of there. No, she did not. Phillips then asked her boyfriend, Kenneth Ransom, where they got the money from, and he told her, "We just went out and got some money." Yeah, right. We will find out that there was more to the story. So grab your drink while I take a big sip of my wine cooler and get ready. Things are about to get really nasty. I have to say, not bad, Bartles and James. Later in the morning, Philip and Ransom used the money to go on a shopping spree to purchase clothing for themselves. Little did they know, at the same time, the bodies of Anil Varughese, Roddy Harris, Joerene Pequeno, and Arnold Pequeno were discovered at the Malibu Grand Prix race center. Anil's body was discovered in the manager's office. He had been stabbed at least 85 times in the chest and 3 times in the abdomen. Anil was a night manager and was 18 at the time of his murder and was a pre-med student at Houston Baptist University. Roddy Harris was a music student at Houston Baptist University and a church music director who had started working at the Grand Prix Amusement Center the night before he was killed. Roddy Harris' body was found in one of the stalls in the bathroom, and he had been stabbed 7 times in the chest. He was 22 years old at the time of his murder. Brothers Joerene and Arnold were found in another one of the bathrooms. Joerene's body was found in another stall within that same bathroom, and he had been stabbed 11 times, with 7 of those to his neck and 1 cut severing his jugular vein. Arnold Pequeno's body was in the bathroom corner with his head up under the urinals. Arnold had been stabbed 22 times. Arnold's watch and class ring were missing, along with his black satchel. Arnold was 19, and his younger brother, Joerene, was 18 at the time of their murder. The victim's blood covered the bathroom from ceiling to floor and was splattered on the walls. The medical investigator, John Bright, said he was amazed by the amount of brutality that was involved. There was quite a bit of cutting, and it looked like there was a whole lot of movement that went on in there. Bright went on to say that the victims had multiple cuts and wounds on their hands and arms, indicating they were trying to ward off blows from a knife. 3 of the victims' throats had been slashed, and a 5-inch blade of a knife was found under the body of the night manager. All suffered greatly. J.C. Moser, a former Houston homicide detective who worked on the case, told a reporter, "In that restroom, there was at least 2 inches of blood on that floor. It was like they had a water leak. I'll never forget that. It's the most blood I'd ever seen at one location. It was awful." Medical examiners had difficulty determining if the victims also had been shot because the bodies had been stabbed so many times. There was so much blood. A trail of blood led out of the bathroom, through the race center, and into the parking lot area. Later, analysis revealed there was blood that did not match that of the victims, and was blood that was only compatibly genetically to Kenneth Ransom. Crime scene investigators found Ransom's fingerprint from his left index finger on the door to the stall where Harris's body was found. Randall's fingerprints were lifted from the inside of the door from where Joerene Pequeno's body was found. Over $1,300 was missing from the safe and cash drawers, along with Wilkerson's final paycheck. On the evening of July 1st, 1983, Ransom was with his girlfriend, Wanda Phillips, watching television when the news story about the murders was broadcast. Phillips said that upon seeing the story, Ransom was upset and that he left and said he was going to Wharton, Texas. Phillips told police that the last time she saw her boyfriend, he was wearing a high school ring and a watch that she had never seen him wear before. Now, Richard Wilkerson was arrested on Friday, July 1st, 1983, and was charged with capital murder on Saturday. Upon being arrested, Wilkerson gave a statement and admitted his involvement in the robbery and murders. Wilkerson took the police to the locations where evidence was gathered. James Randall was also arrested on Friday and was held by the juvenile authorities while a hearing was scheduled to determine if he would be charged. On Saturday, July 2nd, 1983, police also charged Kenneth Ransom with capital murder, but he was not taken into custody until 4 days later. James Randall told police he was unaware of the planned murders and said he was playing video games. However, police found blood on his clothing, indicating he was a participant. I gotta take another drink, guys. Okay, maybe two. And get a snuggle for my little fur baby, Josie, who is my true crime friend in the studio with me today, along with Anne, my emotional support doll. We'll get to Anne later. I want to say that this case, it has stuck with me since my youth. I could never and still can't understand why anyone would kill over money and in such a brutal way. As you'll learn in the next section, Anil complied with Richard Wilkerson, gave him his paycheck after he signed his final time card, which, believe it or not, Wilkerson did cash that check after the murders. Not only was this a senseless crime, it was brutal. It was horrific. I could not find any information about Anil being the one who had fired Wilkerson, and I can only assume there were multiple managers and that Wilkerson and friends wanted more than just the final paycheck. They wanted blood. Richardson was found guilty of capital murder on January 6, 1984, following the trial. They returned affirmative answers to the special circumstances submitted under the Texas death penalty statute. And pursuant to the Texas statute, Wilkerson was sentenced to death. While researching this case, I also found that Richard James Wilkerson was arrested on January 27, 1982, and charged with assault, and took a plea deal in which he received 6 months in jail. I can't help but believe the jury took this previous case into consideration, as it was just a couple of years before. In August 1987, Wilkerson filed his first application for post-conviction writ of habeas corpus. Wilkerson raised, among other things, ineffective assistance of trial counsel, just like the blue-eyed butcher from our first episode, along with a constitutional challenge to the state's use of peremptory challenge called a Batson. The state trial court, without conducting a hearing, recommended that relief be denied and forwarded the application to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. An evidentiary hearing was conducted, and it was concluded that Wilkerson had not proven a Batson claim based on the prosecutor's race-neutral explanations for its peremptory challenges to the black potential jurors. In July of 1989, Wilkerson filed a pro se motion seeking an emergency stay from the United States District Court and also requested appointment of counsel. The district court granted the stay and appointed counsel. Wilkerson then, with new counsel, filed an amended petition. Wilkerson was saying that the jury was not given full consideration to his evidence in deciding whether to impose the death penalty, and that because of his youth and the fact that he suffers from a serious, long-standing mental impairment that was diagnosed when he was 7 years old, along with a recent neuropsychological evaluation, confirmed that he is borderline mentally retarded and suffers from serious brain dysfunction and cognitive impairments, that he is functionally illiterate, and that he should have been given life in prison instead of the death penalty. The state pointed out in their response that Wilkerson's strongest test scores were in the test areas dealing with day-to-day problems. Wilkerson also stated in his appeal that due to the fact he accepted full responsibility, that this should have been treated in consideration in mitigation of punishment. The state rejected this as well, stating that Wilkerson's counsel made a full and uninterrupted argument to the jury that his acceptance of responsibility could and should be considered under the special issue, and that the jury was free to accept this argument. With all of his appeals denied, Wilkerson was pronounced dead at 1:16 a.m. on August 31st, 1983. Richard Wilkerson was 29 at the time of his death and was the 67th person executed in Texas and the 102nd person executed by lethal injection in the United States. Richard James Wilkerson's last statement before death. I quote, "I'd just like to say that I don't hate nobody. What I did was wrong. I just hope everybody is satisfied with what's about to happen." Richard Wilkerson's sister, Michelle Wynn, also submitted the following statement on behalf of her brother. "This execution is not justice. This execution is an act of revenge. If this is justice, then justice is blind. Take a borderline retarded young male who for the first time ever in his life committed a felony, then contaminate his true tell-all confession, add a judge who discriminates plus an all-white jury, pile on the ineffective assistance of counsel, and execute the option of rehabilitation, persecute the witness, and you have created a death sentence for a family lasting over 10 years. I will say it once again. This execution isn't justice, but an act of revenge. Killing RJ will not bring Anil back. It only justifies an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's too late to help RJ, but maybe this poem will help someone else out there." Her poem. Seeing through the eyes of a death row inmate. Sometimes I wonder why. Why he? Why did he go out into the world to see? To be out there and see what really did exist. Now his name is written down on the death row list. I can only imagine how lonesome he was all by himself. We both knew he had no future left. His hopes and dreams became a fantasy. He often said, "There's nothing left of me." I have asked myself, why did he get involved with drugs? He could never explain why he hung around with thugs. Did it really make him feel like a king? Did he actually think he was capable of getting away with anything? He knew the thought of life wasn't ticking in his head. There's nothing left but the memory of those who lay dead. What was did cannot be undone. He has confessed. He was one of the guilty ones. What would he say to the victim's family? "I'm sorry, and my head wasn't on straight. I hope you will accept my apology, even though it's too late. I never knew I would take a life and commit a crime. I regret it because now I have to face the lethal injection while doing death row time. I knew I would pay with struggle and strife, but I never thought the cost would be me losing my life." Okay, I need to stop and take a drink. That was a powerful statement in a poem. As we all know, but sometimes forget, the victims' families are not the only ones who suffer. Richard Wilkerson's family suffers, and his son grew up without a father. I'm not sure how I feel about Richard receiving the death penalty. He was young and had his whole life ahead of him. Yet, he killed and helped kill 4 people. If I was one of the family members of the slain, I would want the person or persons to pay for their crime. What does justice look like? Was his death justice? Or would life in prison have been justice? Was an all-white jury legal? I do not know the answers to these questions, as I have never been in the criminals, victims, or family's shoes. I can say that I find comfort in knowing that an innocent man was not put to death, as Richard James Wilkerson confessed and was guilty of this horrific crime. Okay, I'm going to take a quick sip of my watermelon and mint wine cooler. I'm kind of liking it. Next up, we're going to talk about James Edward Randall, the 16-year-old cousin of Richard James Wilkerson. Yes, you heard me right, fans. 16. The state of Texas certified James Edward Randall a juvenile as an adult, and he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. During the trials for Ransom and Wilkerson, there was conflicting information about Randall's involvement. Everything from Randall helped kill 2 of the victims to he was playing video games and not involved. However, Randall's fingerprint was lifted from inside of the door to the stall where Joerene Pequeno's body was found. I also need to tell you, Kenneth Ransom's attorney, while standing outside the wall unit during Ransom's execution, said that James Randall had recently signed a statement that he did the killings and tried to kill Ransom when Ransom tried to stop the killings. Ransom's attorney tried to file an appeal based on this and the fact that he felt Randall was a sociopath. However, it was rejected. Both trials did record testimony that Randall, along with Wilkerson, talked of how they had slashed somebody's throat. Also, earlier, I mentioned that Randall took the victim's wallet away from Phillips, who was Randall's girlfriend, when she found it in the trash of her apartment. James Edward Randall did file his appeal, stating that the state failed to demonstrate that a juror who was released was not qualified to be a juror, and that the evidence was insufficient to support a conviction for capital murder. Now, the appeals were rejected based on the review of the jurors' answers and the fact that the murders were carried out during a robbery. James Edward Randall was sentenced to life in prison. However, he was released on parole January 18th, 2019, and currently lives in Houston, Texas. Okay, friends, I got to just stop right there, as I'm a little wigged out. I had to do some deep digging, go down several rabbit holes to find out where Randall is currently. It took me about 6 hours, but I found it. And I am in total shock that there is no news coverage or any news articles that I could find online about Randall being released. I can't help but think this is newsworthy, considering this was the worst, most horrific case in Houston's history. And I found several recaps of the murders up through 2017. I can't help but think and wonder how Anil, Roddy, Arnold, and Joerene's families feel about this. Their loved ones were brutally murdered and their lives cut short, yet James Randall is out free. I understand Randall was only 16 and that at that age the brain is still developing and their impulse control is an issue. I get all of that. I understand it. But you can't convince me that Randall, who just spent the last 35 years in prison, was rehabilitated and taught the life skills or the value of life needed to survive outside of prison. I hope I'm wrong, but I will be keeping an eye on Randall and let you know if he gets in trouble again. Another quick sip as we head into the story of Kenneth Ray Ransom, who was the third and final person convicted in the Grand Prix murders and was sentenced to the death penalty. It's not wine, but I have to say this wine cooler on a hot summer day out on the river, out by the pool, it's kind of refreshing. Light, unlike wine, kind of thirst quenching at the same time. Good job, Bartles and James. Earlier, I told you about Ransom and his participation. Ransom was the person who took the knife from his girlfriend's kitchen. And later, after the killings, the three men went back to her apartment to split up the money. Now, Kenneth Ransom was 20 years old at the time of the murders and was employed as a plumber. Ransom was a friend of Wilkerson and his cousin Randall. Ransom previously spent 2 years in prison for burglary and auto theft. Let me just get my thoughts out of the way real quick here on Mr. Kenneth Ransom. Okay, my voice is going to get a little low because he is a true piece of work. Not only was he a previous offender, he tried to lie his way out of this horrific case and blame everyone else. His childhood, his parents, his upbringing, Wilkerson, Randall, anyone but him. Now, I know that's typical of a lot of cold-blooded killers, but come on, no. Kenneth Ransom did complete high school and was employed as a plumber, had a girlfriend who had a child, and yes, is a cold-blooded murderer. Or should I say, was. Kenneth Ray Ransom was pronounced dead on October 28, 1997, at the age of 34, and without his last meal, as he declined it. Kenneth Ransom was the 32nd inmate in 1997 to be executed in Texas. At his execution was Ransom's mother, Pearlie Ransom, his cousin, Jocelyn Gums. None of the victims' families were in attendance. Ransom's last statement, and I quote, "First and foremost, I would like to tell the victims' families that I am sorry because I feel like I am guilty. I am sorry for the pain all of them have gone through during holidays and birthdays. They are without their loved ones. I have said from the beginning, and will say it again, I am innocent. I did not kill no one. I feel like this is the Lord's will that will be done. I love you all, you know it. Don't cry. Tell my brothers I love them. You all be strong." As a lethal injection was being administered to Kenneth, he began chanting a prayer while his mother pleaded with him to contact her if he returned in another life. Pearlie said, "If you can come back and tell me how you are doing," and then collapsed while saying, "Oh, Jesus, oh, Jesus." Seriously, Kenneth, you want to say you're sorry for the family's pain, yet you still lie and say you had nothing to do with it. A true narcissist, and in my opinion, a sociopath. I do feel sympathy for his mother, Pearlie, as I can't imagine the pain of watching your son put to death. Yet, she got to be there with her son when he died, unlike the 4 victims that were murdered. And one can only assume they were terrified and in pain at the time of their death. Let's look at the evidence, trial, and facts, and I'll let you decide if he is guilty and if his death was justified. Ransom testified at his trial that he was playing video games while the killings occurred. 3 of the victims' throats were slashed with the knife Ransom took from his girlfriend's dish strainer. Ransom admits he took his share of the money from the robbery, but he says he did it because he was scared. Ransom's fingerprint was lifted from the door of the stall where Roddy Harris' body was found, and only Ransom's blood was a match to the blood left on the sink's counter, on a paper towel, and on the bathroom door. Also, remember that later in the day of the killings, Ransom was watching TV with his girlfriend, got agitated when he saw the news, and fled to Wharton, Texas. The last time his girlfriend saw him, he was wearing Arnold Pequeno's high school class ring and a watch that was identical to the one that Arnold was wearing at the time he was murdered. Ransom, along with his mother, stepfather, and attorney, turned himself in on July 5th, 1983. He was wearing the class ring and watch that belonged to Arnold. Dude, that's just cold and so wrong. If I was his mother, I would have smacked him upside the head, made him take it off, put it in a Ziploc bag, and turn it in. My God, he's going to turn himself in for murder that he says he didn't commit, but he's wearing the class ring and the watch. That's like pouring salt into the wound. And I'm going to just say it here, in my opinion, makes you guilty. Based on the facts from the court's opinion, Ransom and Randall killed Arnold, Joerene, and Roddy, while Wilkerson alone killed Anil, the nighttime manager. Ransom, as I am sure no one will be surprised to find out, filed his first appeal in June 1989, raising 14 points of error in his trial. Now, I'm not going to cover all of them, just a few. Now, Ransom argued that he was denied effective assistance of counsel during the penalty phase of his trial because counsel failed to discover and present mitigating evidence. Now, as you've heard me say twice now, we've heard this before. Earlier for Wilkerson and on the previous episode, the Blue-Eyed Butcher. He also argues that his due process rights were violated when the trial court refused to instruct the jury on a lesser included offense. Ransom went on to argue that counsel would have discovered his child welfare cases had counsel mounted a thorough investigation. Ransom felt the case file would have provided the defense with a wealth of information, including that during his childhood, Ransom was regularly subjected to physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of his mother and older siblings. Ransom's file would show that he was shuttled between his mother and foster parents. The courts found that at no time had Ransom or anyone in his family told his attorneys about the alleged child abuse. I say alleged, but we will get to the details of that. The state concluded that Ransom had not met the burden on this matter, and it was denied. The issue that the jury was not given the opportunity to acquit of capital murder and instead convict him of a lesser degree was also denied, due to the fact the evidence did not support a lesser charge. Ransom was trying to convince everyone he took part in the robbery, but not the murders. All stay of executions were denied and appeals dismissed. When reviewing the case files from Kenneth's childhood, there is documentation and evidence that Ransom was removed from his home along with his 6 siblings for abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. I found no evidence or documentation of sexual abuse. Ransom was returned back to his mother on multiple occasions until he was permanently removed from his mother's care and placed at the Dorsey foster home. Ransom began shoplifting in 1975 and was arrested for theft in 1976 on 2 different occasions. Ransom's file also states that Kenneth was intelligent with great learning potential. However, he only wanted to study what he wanted instead of his class assignments. In July of 1979, Ransom was placed with his maternal aunt, Earlene Parlane, in Morton, Texas. In November 1979, Ransom moved out of his aunt's home and went to live with his girlfriend. Now, guys, I'm going to stop, do a little math here, and everyone will tell you math's not my strong suit, okay? Good with a calculator, but I think he was around 16, 17 at the time. But he did finish high school, or at least got his GED. In 1980, Ransom was involved in several burglaries and thefts. As I mentioned earlier, he was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison. The final report showed on January 1981 that Kenneth Ransom was a bright kid with the potential for success, and that it was a shame Kenneth Ransom had ruined his life. Little did that person know that Kenneth went on to not only ruin his life, but to viciously take the life of 4 others. Wow, what a case. As I mentioned earlier, this case has stuck with me since I was a teenager. Not only was it one of the most horrific murders in Houston's history, it was also a shocking crime at the time because of the ages of the murderers. I can tell you there is still one location of the Houston Grand Prix Amusement Center in Houston, Texas, which is located at 13901 East Tex Freeway. You can still go drive those cars. Now, the location of the murders was shuttered in the 1990s and is now a CarMax, which, when I discovered that, I was like, oh, hell's bells. I was just at that CarMax 2 months ago with my youngest son buying a car. Didn't know that's where the murders happened. It's a different building and everything, so that's good. Didn't feel any bad vibes, but I don't know. I think a memorial or something would have been much better suited instead of CarMax. I'm off to enjoy another glass of wine. I'm finished with my Bartles & James watermelon and wine cooler, my bougie cooler. But this case brought out so many emotions which are still running through me. And the fact that one of the murderers is now living among the Houston population terrifies me. My family's still there. Granddaughter, my kids, my daughter-in-law. It's scary. Randalls, I'm keeping an eye on you. Stay out of trouble. If you want to support me in true crime and wine time, please join our Patreon fan club at patreon.com/truecrimeandwinetime. We have 3 different tiers of membership, and each include additional content and exclusive content based on the tier. You can also interact with me directly on our Facebook page at True Crime and Wine Time, or on the Twitter at Terry True Crime. It takes a lot of hours, a lot of research to put these episodes together, but it's my passion. Thank you for listening to True Crime and Wine Time. Until next week, stay safe, watch out for crime, and enjoy your wine time.